A 26-year-old man named William Hargrove paced anxiously back and forth inside of his tiny bedroom. Will was nervous because he was about to take the biggest chance of his life. He was about to ask a woman, who he had only known for a few weeks, if she would marry him. The woman he wanted to propose to, who was sitting right behind him on his bed, was about to head back to Russia, where she lived, in just a few hours. He worked a low-paying job as a mechanic, and he lived in this bedroom. This was his apartment, this one room, which was being rented to him by a married couple who owned the house it was in. He was confident she would say yes, and Will, who was terrified at this point, took a deep breath and then reached into his pocket and pulled out a jewelry box. Inside of it was a beautiful emerald ring that was situated on a white gold band. He dropped down to a knee and he held out the jewelry box and he opened it up. When she saw the ring and saw him on his knee, she knew what was happening and she began trembling with excitement. And then he pulled the ring out of its holder and he slipped it onto Anna's finger and he asked her if she would marry him. And Anna, she began crying tears of joy and shouted, yes. Later that day, Anna would fly back home to Russia, but as soon as she landed, she began getting her affairs in order to go right back to Oregon to live with Will permanently. And 2 months later, Anna was touching back down at the Oregon airport, and then right near the baggage claim, she had her big reunion with Will. That evening, when Anna and Will drove from the airport to Will's place, as soon as the door swung open, there was a woman standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, staring out at both of them. This woman was 34-year-old Michelle Chavez, and she and her husband were the married couple who rented the bedroom apartment to Will. Michelle had dark hair and piercing eyes, and even when she was being pleasant, she could be very intimidating. And right now, it was obvious she was not trying to be pleasant. And so Anna, who sensed something was wrong here, kind of awkwardly said hi to Michelle, but Michelle, she just glared at Anna and said nothing, and then looked from Anna to Will and said, Will, I need to talk to you. And then before Will could say anything, Michelle grabbed his arm and began dragging him through the house to the back. And so Anna, she's very confused about what's happening here, but she began taking her suitcases and marching over to the side of the house where Will's bedroom was. And as she did this, she could hear on the other side of the house, Michelle really yelling at Will, but Anna couldn't make out what Michelle was actually saying. Will finally did come into the bedroom with his head hung down low, and Anna says, hey, what's going on? Why was she so upset? What's happening here? And in a quiet, trembling voice, Will would tell Anna that Michelle and her husband had just told him that they can't live here anymore. They have to move out. Anna couldn't believe this. She had just flown across the world to be here with Will, and now they don't have a place to live. She said, what's going on? Why is she kicking us out? He would tell her that Michelle sort of had a crush on him, and when she saw Anna moving in with Will, she became really jealous and told them to leave. Anna was obviously really upset about this situation, but after Will had explained what's going on with Michelle, Anna wasn't mad at Michelle. She actually felt kind of bad for her. And within a few days, Anna and Will had moved out of Michelle's place and found a place of their own in a neighboring town. And as soon as they were settled inside of there, it was like relief washed over both of them, and they both became really excited to plan their wedding and think about their future together. A few weeks later, Anna woke up early and put on her beautiful, simple white wedding dress that she brought from Russia, and then she and Will piled into his car and they headed to the beach. The couple had decided to go with a very simple, intimate outdoor wedding ceremony led by an officiant. When the couple arrived at the beach, Anna hopped out and immediately began walking over the sand towards the water, and Will stayed back to call the officiant because he didn't see him anywhere. Even though Anna and Will had left Michelle's house and had no contact with her, over the past couple of weeks, Michelle had become a sort of thorn in their side, sending Anna all these really threatening messages, things like demanding that Anna share Will with her, or else she'll do something awful. And so Anna is thinking that Michelle is going to find a way to sabotage their wedding. And so at some point, Anna looked along the beach and saw a little bit farther along were the two friends that she and Will had invited to be a part of their wedding. And as she's chatting, she looks up and she sees Will coming down onto the beach, and he's on his cell phone. But it's obvious there's something wrong, and by the time Will actually got up to the group, he had hung up his phone, but it was very obvious he was really upset. And as soon as he reached the group, he would announce to Anna and their friends that the officiant was not going to be able to make it. And so unfortunately, the wedding was off, at least for now. Now, Anna was totally crushed by this, But she could tell Will also was totally crushed by this. And so Anna and Will's friends, they said bye and they headed their way, and Anna and Will had a very somber walk along the beach back to their car. But on the drive from the beach back to their apartment, they would stop at a fast food restaurant, McDonald's. They were laughing about how ridiculous it was that they were eating fast food in their wedding clothes. A couple weeks later, Anna was still in the process of rescheduling their wedding, and she was starting to feel very frustrated with Will. Over the last week or so, Will, instead of helping her with the wedding, was spending much of his time outside of the apartment, pacing around, while talking to someone on the phone. He had to be talking to either Michelle or talking to someone else about Michelle. 3 weeks after the couple's first failed wedding attempt, Will would approach Anna and ask her very sheepishly if she would come with him on a walk through the woods, because he had something important he wanted to tell her. And so the couple piled into Will's car and they drove to the parking lot right near the woods. They got out, they hopped on a path, and they began walking into the trees. At some point, Will paused for a moment and then, with a shaky voice, told Anna that he felt like they rushed into their relationship and he wanted to call off the engagement. Anna was so caught off guard and heartbroken by what she was hearing that she couldn't say anything. She just stood there in stunned silence and then finally just turned around and stormed off away from Will, deeper into the woods, until she was out of Will's sight. The next day, when Will woke up, the first thing he did was pick up his phone and text Anna. But Anna didn't write back. He couldn't help but feel this overwhelming sense of regret about the decision he had made the day before. He wanted Anna back. So, over the course of the next several hours, Will would send Anna a series of increasingly more desperate-sounding text messages, pleading with her to just talk to him, please. But she didn't respond to any of his messages. And so Will decided that the only way he could get Anna back would be if he did something big. And at some point, an idea came to him. He would do what he had seen heroes do in several of his favorite science fiction and fantasy movies. He would use time travel to go back in time and get Anna back. And he scoured the internet for any information about how to build a time-traveling machine. But at some point, after 24 to 48 hours, Will realized that no matter how good these sketches were, he lacked, 1, the resources, and 2, the knowledge and expertise of how to take this sketch and actually make it into a real physical time machine. He had another epiphany. Sometimes the heroes didn't need to use time machines to go back in time. They would use magic. And so suddenly Will decided, oh my goodness, I need to find the right magical spell that will allow me to travel back in time and get Anna. He communicated with strangers on the internet, telling them that he would sell his soul to them if they could give him the right spell. And then anytime he thought he found the right spell, he would close his eyes and chant the words out loud, and then open his eyes only to realize he was stuck in the present. After basically staying awake for 72 hours on this quest to go back in time to get Anna back, Will realized that it was not going to work, and so he gave up. The next morning, on April 19th, so this is 3 days after he broke up with Anna in the woods, Will heard a knock on his front door. And when he opened the door, there were 2 police officers standing there. And when Will asked them, what's going on, they told him that they actually needed his help, and would he mind coming to the station to talk to them. And when he got to the police station, he was led into a small interview room, and he sat down behind this metal desk in front of the other 2 officers, and he asked them, what can I do for you? And one of the officers eventually asked Will if he had recently eaten at a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant. Will said, yeah, a few days ago I did eat at a KFC. Why does that matter? It would turn out Michelle did not just have a crush on Will. Michelle and Will had been having an intense affair right in Michelle's house with her husband since 2015, so a full year before Will met Anna. Now, Will had wanted Michelle to leave her husband and be with him, and Michelle had told Will that she wanted the same thing, but she couldn't do it right now. And so to show Will that she was serious, that one day she would be with him, she gave him her wedding ring, which was an emerald stone sitting on a white gold band. It was like a promise ring. But as time went on, Michelle didn't really show any signs of trying to leave her husband, and so Will started to wonder if he was just kind of letting his life slip by. The ring that Will gave Anna when he proposed to her was the same ring that Michelle had given Will. Her wedding ring, the promise ring. And so when Michelle saw that ring on Anna's finger on a Facebook post that Anna made about having been proposed to by Will, Michelle was enraged. And then, just a few weeks later, when Anna showed up at Michelle's house to move into Will's bedroom with him, she grabbed Will, dragged him to the side of the house, and said, "You need to choose right now between me and Anna." However, over the following weeks, despite Michelle having booted them from her property, she could not let go of her jealousy of Anna and her love for Will. And so she sent Anna all these threatening messages on Facebook demanding that she share Will with her or else, and she began incessantly calling and texting Will demanding that he choose her over Anna. But despite all this pressure, Will just could not make up his mind. He didn't know which woman he wanted to be with more. And so to buy himself some time, he had lied to Anna about hiring an officiant for their wedding on the beach. But finally, on April 16th, for whatever reason, Will had decided that he knew which woman he wanted to go with. He wanted to go with Michelle. So he brought Anna out into the woods, and effectively their relationship was over, at which point Anna turned and stormed off into the woods. And so Will, he watched her disappear, and then he turned around and walked back along the path back toward his car. And when he got there, he opened his trunk and got something out of it, and then he walked back along the trail into the woods where he had seen Anna last. And when he reached that spot, and eventually he spotted Anna. She was standing in a clearing, looking up into the sky, seemingly lost in thought. And so Will quietly walked up right behind her, and then he raised the shotgun he had gotten out of his trunk. He placed the barrel against the back of Anna's skull, and before she could even react, say something, turn around, do anything, he pulled the trigger. Afterward, he ran back down the trail to his car, and he gathered up all of Anna's things that happened to be inside of the car, and then he brought all of that stuff back into the woods and kind of dumped it both on and around Anna's body. The next day, a walker and their dog happened to come across Anna's body, and when the police were called out to the site, they began sifting through all of the trash that was kind of scattered around Anna's body. And inside of a crumpled up KFC bag, the police would find a receipt for the day of the murder, and that receipt belonged to Will. The morning after Will Anna, he sent those initial text messages to Anna just to cover his tracks. But as he sent them, he actually did feel an enormous sense of regret about the decision he made. He no longer wanted Michelle, he wanted Anna. And it was at that point that he decided he would do what the heroes in some of his favorite movies did. He would go back in time and undo the murder and get his love back. But of course, his efforts would fail. 3 years after Anna's murder, Will was sentenced to life in prison. As for Michelle, she was never charged with any crime.